I'm Managing Editor Jonathan Larson with TYT Investigates, and this is TYTI Daily. If you don't already subscribe to us, we're here every weekday morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We have commentary on breaking news, commentary on political analysis, and we do original reporting. Investigative reporter Tiwa Cheng and myself, we do both commentary, as I said, as well as discuss our own original reporting. Today, there is a lot of news over the weekend about the alleged Russian bounties on US soldiers in Afghanistan, and a lot of questions about what Trump knew about it and when he knew about it, and Democrats are demanding answers, which is an appropriate response. Nancy Pelosi, within the last hour, the House Speaker demanding a briefing on exactly what is known. So let's review what's been reported to be known, which, of course, two different things. The New York Times broke this story originally. Here's one of the things they had to say about this. Just yesterday, in a follow-up story, they quoted a National Security Council spokesman, John L. Ulliott, said in a statement on Sunday night, this is just last night, quote, "The veracity of the underlying allegations continues to be evaluated," unquote, casting doubt on how true or accurate these reports are about Russia putting bounties, essentially paying the Taliban and criminal leaders in Afghanistan to kill US troops, and I should note coalition troops as well. Mr. Trump said on Sunday night on Twitter that, quote, "Intel just reported to me that they did not find this info credible and therefore did not report it to me or the VP. One senior administration official offered a similar explanation to the New York Times, saying that Mr. Trump was not briefed because the intelligence agencies had come to no consensus on the findings. First of all, you don't have to have a consensus. You don't need every single intelligence agency to agree before you elevate it to the president, right? If something is really spectacularly bad, even if one person says, well, I'm not sure, it gets elevated. Sometimes you even get a war in Iraq out of intelligence that has not been signed off on by everyone. Another official said there was broad agreement that the intelligence assessment was accurate, with some complexities because different aspects of the intelligence, including interrogations, which we'll get back to, and surveillance data, resulted in some differences among agencies in how much confidence to put in each type. Here's where we get to the flashback. Representative Liz Cheney, the Republican congresswoman from Wyoming, daughter of Vice President Dick Cheney, the third-ranking House Republican, because what would a scandal involving interrogation of military prisoners and possible casus belli for the U.S. be without a Cheney, said in a Twitter post on Sunday, quote, "If reporting about Russian bounties on U.S. forces is true, the White House must explain, 1, why weren't the president or vice president briefed? Was the info in the presidential daily briefing, the PDB? Who did know and when? 3, what has been done in response to protect our forces and hold Putin accountable?" Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, Republican leader in the Senate, noted that he wrote an amendment last year rebuking Mr. Trump's withdrawal of forces from Syria and Afghanistan. Okay, I want to share something from the original report from the New York Times, came out Friday night. The intelligence assessment is said to be based, at least in part, on interrogations of captured Afghan militants and criminals. The officials, the intelligence officials or national security officials who described this stuff to the New York Times, did not describe the mechanics of the Russian operation, such as how targets were picked or how money changed hands. It is also not clear whether Russian operatives had deployed inside Afghanistan or met with their Taliban counterparts elsewhere. The fact that this is based on interrogations is really important, right? And if you don't understand why, you really should. Our history of interrogations in the past 20 years is not a good one. American law enforcement has actually figured out pretty well how to do interrogations, and it is not the way you see in the movies. However, we apparently screwed that up, with the Iraq War, with the war on terror, even before the Iraq War. And now we think it's by acting like tough guys, which gets you, if you go too far, it gets you what you want to hear. It's literally confirmation bias in action. Quoting again from the New York Times, while officials were said to be confident about the intelligence that Russian operatives offered and paid bounties to Afghan militants for killing Americans, they have greater uncertainty about how high in the Russian government the covert operation was authorized and what its aim may be. So the headline says Russia did this. On page 2, 2/3 of the way into the story, we find out there is uncertainty about how high in the Russian government the covert operation was authorized. In other words, it might not be Russia, it might be a Russian, or a part of the Russian government, or a part of the Russian intelligence apparatus. That's not how it's getting described now, right? All too often, when we hear about stories involving foreign policy, or even stories about domestic U.S. policy, right? It's if one element of the government did it, then the entire government signed off, and the head of the government knew about it. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't be held responsible for it, but that's very different from saying they knew about it, authorized it, and had a strategic goal for it. Here's another interesting aspect of this. Some officials have theorized that the Russians may be seeking revenge on NATO forces. Remember, it's not just US forces who had these bounties put on them, it was coalition forces. Russians may be seeking revenge for a 2018 battle in Syria in which the American military killed several hundred pro-Syrian forces, including numerous Russian mercenaries, as they advanced on an American outpost. Officials have also suggested that the Russians may have been trying to derail peace talks to keep the United States bogged down in Afghanistan, but the motivation remains murky. Now, notice I said there, what did I just say there? Officials have suggested Americans may have been trying to derail peace talks to keep the United States bogged down in Afghanistan. Talking to the Washington Post, which reported yesterday that it is believed that some of those bounties actually led to combat deaths of United States soldiers. The Washington Post talked to Carter Malkasian, who served as a senior advisor to the previous chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is at the very bottom of their story. Malkasian now said that the bounty operation, if true, could be a random initiative rather than one that reflected a well-coordinated program ordered by the highest levels of government. That's really important, right? If it's a random initiative, that means it wasn't Putin. Maybe it's some rogue operative. Maybe Putin wanted plausible deniability and said, you know what, guys, go out, create chaos. I'm going to be over here in my plausible deniability cone. You guys go nuts. But here's the really important part. I'm going to reiterate this again from the Times. U.S. officials have suggested that Russia may have been trying to mess up the peace talks to keep the U.S. bogged down in Afghanistan. Malkasian, the guy quoted by the Washington Post, says that a primary Russian goal in Afghanistan continues to be the exit of American forces. These are our two premier national newspapers quoting their national security experts, who both say, as a matter of course, the Russians want the US out, the Russians want the US bogged down in Afghanistan. So what we have here is a mess of what do we actually know, right? You may have noticed, I certainly noticed, we did not get a lot of direct quotes, right? We got a lot of characterizations. They put a bounty out on US forces. What does that mean? What did they say and to whom? And how do we know this? Who said what? Under what conditions, right? Were they tortured for this information? Was this information something that was given up to US military sources who might themselves want to continue to stay in Afghanistan? None of this stuff is known yet. The problem with that is obvious for national security and national foreign policy implications. If you don't know exactly what has happened, it is hard to know what to do. In which case, the best course of action is usually to wait and to get more information, unless there is some potential existential imminent threat, obviously. And of course, you address it with the Russians, who have denied it And of course, you address it with the Taliban, who have also denied it. That's the prudent course of action. What you do not do if you are a national political leader is to assume all of this is true in the worst sense possible in a maximalist way that reflects maximally poorly on Trump. You do not assume the confirmation bias version of events. You do not assume that it must be true that Trump knew exactly what was going on. Putin ordered it, and it was a clear-cut exchange of cash in return for killing United States troops. Right? That's the maximalist version of what happened here. And if you assume that to be true, and you then go out speaking like a national leader, a politician, a political candidate, whatever it is, with that version of facts as your premise, you are setting yourself up for exactly what happened with Russia the last time around, right? All the Democrats, the entire resistance, subscribe to this maximalist, most extremely bad narrative of what Trump did and why. And it never materialized. And coming off of that was what gave Trump some of his biggest moments politically in terms of polls and all that. We're at a point in time where the guy is on the ropes, right? And yes, absolutely, Democrats should be out there saying, we need a briefing. We want to know exactly what's happened. That's it. That's where, full stop. That's it. Be the governor. Do the job of governing, and then wait for the politicking until you actually have the facts. Otherwise, you're just Charlie Brown, and Putin's over there with the football again. And if you really do think that Putin is this puppeteer mastermind, maybe it should cross your mind that he's happy to have all these bogus narrative stories out there about him, right? It serves his image for everyone to see him in every shadow, right? Be suspicious of the stuff that leads you to believe what you want to be true. So that's my plea, which no Democratic leaders will heed. Although I haven't seen, to Biden's credit, we'll see how long it lasts, I haven't seen Biden out there trying to make political hay about all this. So if you're new to TYTI Daily, one thing you should know is the reason we do it live is so that I can get your feedback in real time, so that we're held accountable for our commentary, for the reporting we do, for the opinions that we express, all of that stuff. So we see and respond to what you guys have to say about it right in the moment. So I'm going to go over to the chat and see what you folks have to say about it right now. Let's see. All right. One of the dangers of me starting early every morning so that you guys can all get logged in is that everyone starts chatting about what's going on in their lives, and I have to go through and find the stuff that's actually about our reporting. So bear with me. James Michael Campbell says, but, where's Eric Prince? Eric Prince, of course, the Betsy DeVos, I guess it's his brother, right? It's her brother, right? The mastermind behind Blackwater, all the mercenary ops out there, and all that. The Sacklers have a vested interest in Poppy and the Mercers in intelligence. Talking obviously about all the rich people with various stakes in the various institutions at work here. Left is Best says, I had heard reporting on MSNBC that U.S. Special Forces captured Taliban fighters with documents and large amounts of U.S. cash shipped from Russia. So I've heard I don't want to make it sound like, oh yeah, I've got my sources on this. The New York Times reported, and I think the Washington Post corroborated, that Taliban holding of significant amounts of U.S. cash was one of the things that both stimulated U.S. intelligence interest in what was going on, and also served as, I guess, evidence behind the basic narrative here. But whether it's come from Russia, I haven't seen that. How they would know that, like, cash is relatively easy, literally not to leave your fingerprints on. That's part of the utility of cash, is so that it's not an electronic transfer. So I'm guessing that the Russians didn't give them a receipt. Kira Brown says, JL, read your earlier post. Shouldn't we be advocating Medicaid for all, including dental, vision, and hearing? People not eligible for Medicaid go broke because of Medicare deductibles. So I'm not super great on healthcare policy. So I try not to weigh in on, yes, Medicare for all, Medicaid for all, universal payer, all of that. Whatever has the political path that leads to Americans not dying or going broke because of healthcare costs, that seems good. What also seems good is not having insurance, right? The idea that that's a thing is a morally debased statement on what we are as an economy. You have to pay in advance as a to gamble, basically, on whether or not you will die or go broke. Adrian Bedingfield says, JT, your mic sounds really good today. Thank you. So for anyone who is curious about the audio issues, so usually I use my iPhone for this, and I have a lav mic, like a professional mic that I clip on here and plug into my phone, and I can't and it was crappy last week, and now I can't find it. So I'm literally just using a standard, home electronic, Best Buy or whatever microphone earbuds combo set and plugging it directly into my laptop and doing it from there. And I did some tests offline before because I was embarrassed by all the bad audio. So hopefully, I'm glad this is sounding better, Adrian, and I appreciate you giving me the check in there. Cycling fan says he definitely knew about this. So I think certainty is really dangerous, just generally speaking, because it means then you do things based on that being true, right? Certainty allows you or even compels you to do things once those facts are factual in your mind, right? And that can lead to mistakes. That's a real theme throughout American history, if not human history. So I think we should be careful about that. Adrian Bedingfield says, to be honest, we should leave Afghanistan. And look, a lot of the people passing on this intelligence, and it seems to involve both military intelligence and the national intelligence apparatus, a lot of those people have investment, and not even nefarious investment, in us staying there, right? If they see Russians talking with the Taliban, they may see our departure as worrying because it opens the door to Russia, who, of course, by the way, fought a savage war for years and eventually got their butts kicked out of Afghanistan by the Taliban. But if Russia is now achieving a rapprochement with the Taliban, maybe Russia ends up having a power center in Afghanistan, which of course is part of the Russian expansionism that a lot of people with entirely good motives are concerned about. Weena Jensen says, I don't get this story and how Trump might actually be implicated. So the subtext of all this is, what did Trump know? When did he know it? And what did he do about it? And the U.S. allies apparently were only briefed on this last week, which seems to give some credence to the idea that the sourcing or the certainty around this was thin at best. One hopes that if this was known and confirmed pretty early on, that U.S. allies would have been told about this, if for no other reason than to assist with intelligence gathering, right? Maybe they have other pieces of the puzzle that could help fill out the pieces that we have. But the sort of cliched Democratic narrative that's arisen is Trump must have known, and he didn't do anything because he's Putin's, fill in some P-tape reference here. Let's see. D Scully kicks in 99 cents. Thank you very much for the support, D Scully, with the super chat there. Thank you so much, as always. Alice Murphy says it's hard to accept that he didn't know or that no one briefed him. I don't know about you guys. I find it highly plausible that Trump doesn't know a lot of things, or even that both are true, right? He was briefed and he didn't know, right? If it was in his PDB and he did not read it, if a briefing falls in the Oval Office and nobody listens, does it really make a sound? That kind of thing, right? It could very well be that he was told, and maybe it was in a thicket of other information, and so it didn't register. Maybe it was told to him in a different way, in a different context than the one we're hearing it, right? A lot of times what will happen is if a piece of information is included in a whole basket of similar information where it all sort of seems to amount to nothing generally, or it's all equally actionable, but also uncertain, it's very easy to just sort of say, you know what, tell me when it becomes a problem. If you pick one piece of that uncertain information out of context and you say the president knew this and didn't do anything, that can look a lot more damning than it actually felt in the moment. And the other thing to keep in mind is, why is this coming out to the Times now, over the weekend, or the Washington Post? Why are these folks speaking out about this? And the obvious answer, right, the Occam's razor answer is because this is serious and he didn't do anything about it. That's fine, but there are other possible interpretations. We just shouldn't jump to certainty about any of them. Katie Kane says we should close many foreign bases and quit spending trillions in wars. We create our enemies. Imperator One says we should just withdraw from everywhere. I think I got that right. It jumped on me right in the middle of reading it. Rena Jensen says amazing how Germany's American troops are being sent home right now. Jess says Bush did, however, at least listen to U.S. intelligence and believe them. I'm not quite sure he would not retaliate against the paid mercenary killing of U.S. soldiers. So, Jess, I would push back on that a little bit. Bush listened to some U.S. intelligence, and the Bush White House made quite clear to U.S. intelligence what it was supposed to say. So I would very strongly push back on the notion that the White House, the Bush White House, kept its hands clean and just sort of passively accepted the intelligence that was given to them and did its best to draw whatever conclusions it could about how to act on it. The Bush White House was very actively engaged in putting their thumb on the apparatus of U.S. intelligence and putting their thumb on the scale of what that intelligence yielded. Katie Kane says, ask Ruby where your mic went. Oh, that's a disturbing thought. Ruby is my dog. If you're not a regular viewer, you should know that. Ruby sometimes has a cameo role in the background, but lately she's decided to guard the house. So if anyone comes near the front door, she starts barking. So I've exiled her for the duration of my live hits. Sorry about that, guys. Adrian Bedingfield says, I don't think Poland or South Korea are areas we should leave. Russia is too horrible, and North Korea as well. Look, obviously, there's a difference between providing protective force on behalf of a nation that wants you there, but I think it's hard to dispute the idea that the U.S. military footprint has proved to be a destabilizing force in regions of the world. Raina Jensen says the audio is relatively unstable. That's bad. I'll have to take a listen on the once it's up. Sorry about that, Raina. Jess weighs in. Says JL caught your reporting earlier this morning too. I did a live hit this morning. There was a news story out about White House insiders allegedly saying that Trump now understands that he is in fact losing. And I talked a little bit about why this could represent a sea change in the campaign. If you want to go check that out as well. Melanie Dennis says, I want to move to my own private island, but I'm broke, so I'll take moving to New Zealand instead. Man, save some room for me. Okay, guys, I'm kind of running out of steam, I will confess, and I am working on a story I'm hoping to get up this week, and I've got some research and some calls and digging that I've got to do on it. So I think I'm going to. Oh wait, let's see. I'll wrap up with D Scully giving us the info on the Iraq War, writing G.W. Bush started making the case for invading Iraq in February of 2001. In March of 2001, Bobby Kennedy Jr. met with him in the map room, and the only maps on display were Iraq with tiny oil wells on it. And of course, there was the famous map that came out also pre-Iraq War, I believe pre 9/11, although I could be wrong about that, in which Iraq's oil fields had basically been allotted out to U.S. oil companies. Um, it's not good, right? And any intelligence that ramps up tensions, that heightens conflict, that demands a bellicose response, whether it be to Russia, the Taliban, Afghanistan, whatever it is, we should be wary of those things, right? Because that becomes a one-way ratchet. If we do something, well, then they're going to do something. And if we've already decided that our only response is militaristic, well, then we're just counting down until we actually start sending in 19-year-olds to die. So even especially when it serves our partisan political interests, we should be wary of that march to war mentality and resist it, especially when, and by the way, as I pointed out, there's every possibility that we're going to learn nuances about this that will make the current today democratic political response to it look like it's opportunistic, it's bloodthirsty, it's Trump delusion syndrome, right? There's every possibility of that, given all the uncertainty we just went through about this intelligence and what it's actually alleging. So let's be careful, and let's also take care of each other, take care of yourselves. And if you don't already, as I said, I hope you'll subscribe, like us, share our content, all of that stuff coming out from T.Y. Chang and myself here at TYT Investigates. This is TYTI Daily. Thanks so much for checking us out. We'll see you soon. Bye.